she said. A man just bit the cashier. And I heard a shopping cart hit something metal in the background. Ren, slow down. I'm in the fries on Ina. Gil, listen to me. A man walked in and bit the cashier on the neck, and she's on the floor, and people are running, and I'm in the back by the dairy coolers, and I need you to come get me. I was standing in our kitchen holding a sleeve of golf balls I'd just cut open with scissors. 3:37 on the microwave clock. The golf balls were for a work outing I didn't want to go to, a client scramble at Ventana Canyon. And I remember looking down at them, sitting there bright white on the countertop while my wife told me something was wrong at a grocery store 11 miles away. Are you safe right now? I'm behind the milk case. There's a stockroom door, but it's locked. People are screaming near the front, Gil. Are you listening? People are screaming. And I think there's more than one. More than one what? I don't know what to call it. Just come get me. I picked up my keys and walked out the front door and left it open behind me. Didn't lock it. Didn't go back for my wallet or a jacket or water or anything a reasonable person would grab, because I have never been a reasonable person. I have been a fast person my entire life. My father used to say I could outrun my own decisions, and he meant it as an insult, but I always took it the other way. And I was in the Tacoma with the engine turning over before I even registered the heat. 107 on the dashboard. The steering wheel was almost too hot to hold, and I gripped it with the palms of my hands because my fingers wouldn't close all the way, which is a stupid detail, but that's how I know this is real memory and not something I've smoothed over. Because nobody invents a detail like gripping a steering wheel with flat palms. I pulled out of the driveway and turned north onto Oracle. Our house sits in a subdivision called Rancho Mesquite, about 2 miles south of Isa Road. And the fries she was talking about was the big one, anchored to a strip mall on the northwest corner of Ina and Oracle. Which meant if traffic was clear and the lights cooperated, I could make it in maybe 12 minutes. I did the math while I drove. 3:37 plus 12 put me there by 3:49, and whatever 40 minutes meant, she hadn't said 40 minutes. I was the one who did that math later. But the news report that came on the radio while I was passing the first intersection said the CDC had issued an advisory at 2:57 p.m. Mountain Time, and that individuals in the Tucson metropolitan area should shelter in place and avoid all contact with persons displaying aggressive or erratic behavior. And I subtracted 2:57 from 3:37 and got 40 minutes, and I thought, she's been in that store for almost 40 minutes since this became real. And she called me and not 911, and I need to go faster. I ran the light at McGee. I want to describe the roads the way they actually were, and not the way they became in the stories people told later. Oracle Road at 3:38 on a Wednesday afternoon in June was not empty. Was not a wasteland. It was regular traffic, maybe a little lighter than a weekday rush. And I was weaving through it like an idiot doing 55 in a 40 because I had no plan beyond the word get. Get to Ren. Get her in the truck. Get home. I was a man built for the verb get. And I had been that man for the entire 26 years of my adult life. Through a career selling commercial real estate in a mid-tier desert city where the whole job was getting to the thing before somebody else did. Getting the signature, getting the listing, getting the close. I was not a man who prepared. I was not a man who thought 3 steps ahead. I was the man you wanted in the room when a deal was falling apart because I would grab it with both hands and hold on. And I was also the man who had never once in his life packed an emergency kit or read a government advisory or filled a bathtub with water before a storm, because I truly believed that speed was the same thing as safety. My phone was on the passenger seat. I picked it up and called her back, and it rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I called a third time and the call didn't connect at all. Just a series of rapid beeps and then silence. And I threw the phone back onto the seat and drove faster. The intersection at Orange Grove was where things started to feel different. I could see brake lights bunching up about a quarter-mile ahead, which happens on Oracle all the time. But the pattern was wrong. Cars were pulling to the right, some of them onto the shoulder, and I saw a woman standing outside her sedan in the left lane, with both hands on the roof of her car, looking south, looking back toward me, and her mouth was open, and she was saying something to someone I couldn't see. I didn't stop. I went around her on the right, bumped over the curb into a Walgreens parking lot, cut through it, came out the other side onto a service road that ran parallel to Oracle, and kept going north. I want to be clear about what I knew and didn't know at that point. I knew my wife was in a Fry's grocery store. I knew something violent had happened there. I knew the radio was saying things that sounded like a script from a movie I'd be embarrassed to watch. I did not know what bit meant in any real sense. A mentally ill person, I thought. Bath salts. A psychotic episode. That's what I assumed because that's what a commercial real estate broker from Tucson assumes. Because the alternative was something I could not integrate while driving 55 through a Walgreens parking lot. I should say something about the sky. The sky in Tucson in June is this bombageous, bleached, hazy white that makes the air look solid. And it was doing that thing where the mountains south of the city disappear into the heat, and you can't tell where the land stops and the atmosphere starts. And everything felt flat and overexposed and relentless, which is how it always feels in June. Except that day, it felt like a lid. I got back onto Oracle north of Orange Grove, and the traffic opened up for about half a mile, and I pushed the truck up to 70, and the Fry's shopping center was visible now on the left. I could see the sign, and then my phone lit up, and it was Ren. Gil. I'm 2 minutes away. I can see the Fry's sign. Don't come to the front. The parking lot there's something happening in the parking lot. Come to the back. There's a loading dock. Are you still inside? I'm in the stockroom. A man who works here let me in. There's 6 of us in here. Are you hurt? No. But Gil, the noises stopped a few minutes ago, and that's worse. When there was screaming, at least I knew where they were. 2 minutes. Come to the back. Ina Road to the alley behind the strip mall. There's a loading dock with a gray roll-up door. I'm coming. The call dropped. I don't know if she hung up or if the network went. I turned left onto Ina, and the intersection was dead. No other cars. The traffic light cycling through its pattern for nobody. And I turned into the strip mall access road and drove along the back of the building past dumpsters and pallets of flattened cardboard boxes and a delivery truck with its cab door hanging open and nobody inside. The loading dock was exactly where she said. A concrete ramp, a gray corrugated roll-up door, and a regular steel door next to it with a push bar. I parked the truck with the nose facing out toward Ina Road because some part of my brain that I'd never formally trained was already thinking about the exit. And I got out, and the heat hit me like a wall. I had been in the air-conditioned truck for 11 minutes, and in that time, the outside world had become a furnace that made my eyes water. And I walked up the ramp and banged on the steel door with the flat of my hand. Nothing for 10 seconds. 15. I banged again. The door opened about 4 inches, and a face appeared, a young guy, maybe 22, in a green Fry's polo with a name tag that said Nestor. And he looked at me with the expression of someone who had decided to stop being surprised by anything. I'm here for my wife. Ren Harmon. She called me. He opened the door wider. Behind him was a stockroom, fluorescent lights still on, shelves stacked with canned goods and paper towels, and a group of people sitting or standing between the shelving units. I saw Wren immediately. She was sitting on an overturned milk crate near the back wall with her purse in her lap and her phone in both hands. And when she saw me, she stood up, and her face did something I had never seen before, which was not relief, not exactly. It was the look of someone who had made a bet with herself about whether the world still worked and had just barely won. I put my arms around her, and she grabbed the back of my shirt with both fists and held on, and I could feel her pulse in her wrists against my sides, rapid and thin. And we stood there for maybe 5 seconds before the guy named Nestor said, "We need to close this door." I let go of her and looked around the stockroom. 6 people. Nestor, who was clearly the one who'd organized whatever this was. An older woman in a sun hat clutching a canvas shopping bag. A man about my age in khaki shorts and hiking sandals, with a gash above his left eyebrow that was bleeding freely into a paper towel he was pressing against it. A teenage girl sitting on the floor with her knees drawn up and her earbuds still in, though I don't know what she thought she was listening to. And a heavy man in a white t-shirt who was standing near the roll-up door with a fire extinguisher in his hands, holding it like a weapon, which it was. "What happened in the store?" I asked Nestor. A guy in the checkout line started biting people. That's the short version. Customers ran. Some didn't make it out. The front of the store is... He stopped and shook his head. "We need to not go to the front of the store." How long ago? 40 minutes, maybe. 45. The first guy bit the cashier, and then 2 other people, and then the cashier got up, and she was different. She was making sounds that weren't right. That's when I started pulling people back here. I looked at Wren. She was calm in the way she gets calm, which is not the same as being okay. Wren is an orthodontist's office manager. She has been running a 12-person office for 9 years. And when things go wrong, she becomes organized and quiet and extremely precise. And the fact that she was sitting on a milk crate with her purse zipped and her phone charged and her shoes still on told me she had already been through the panic and come out the other side into planning mode. "We need to leave," I said. "I have my truck right outside." "How many can it fit?" Nestor asked. "It's a crew cab. 5 in the cab, maybe 2 in the bed if they hold on. 7 of us, including you. It'll work." The man with the gash on his forehead said, "Where would we go?" I hadn't thought about that. I had thought about getting to Wren and getting out. The where hadn't occurred to me because I'm a man who grabs first and aims second, which has worked in commercial real estate and which I was about to discover does not work in anything else. "South," Wren said. "Home is south. We get home and we figure out what's happening and we decide from there." The radio said shelter in place, the older woman in the sun hat said. The radio also said this started 40 minutes ago and nobody's come, I said. And I heard the impatience in my own voice. The familiar sound of me being right and in a hurry and not interested in discussion, which is the sound that has closed 11 commercial leases and also ended 2 friendships. Wren put her hand on my arm. "Gil." I looked at her. "I need you to slow down for 30 seconds and listen to Nestor, because he's been here the whole time and you haven't." That landed on me the way Wren's observations always land, which is sideways and delayed. And I felt it about 3 seconds after she said it. A small, hot flare of embarrassment that I covered by crossing my arms and turning to Nestor and saying, "Okay, what do we need to know?" The front of the store has at least 4 people who are, I don't want to say infected because I don't know what that means, but they're violent and they respond to sound. When someone screamed, they went toward the scream. When the fire alarm went off, they all moved toward the alarm. When it went quiet, They went still. They're still in the store. Between us and the parking lot. Between us and the front parking lot, yeah. But your truck is at the back. So we go out the back door, get in the truck, and drive. That's what I'd do, Nestor said. But the loading dock faces the alley, and the alley connects to the parking lot at both ends, and I don't know what's in the parking lot anymore. When I looked through the one-way window in the stockroom door about 20 minutes ago, there were people in the lot who were walking, but not walking right. You know what I mean. Walking like they forgot the middle part of walking. How many? 3 that I could see. The man with the fire extinguisher said, "I'll go first. I'll clear the ramp." "Nobody is clearing anything," Ren said, and her voice had the quality it gets when she's about to organize something. We go out quiet. We walk. We don't run. We get in the truck, and Gil drives us out the alley to Ina Road, and we go south. "What if they're near the truck?" the teenage girl asked without taking her earbuds out. Then we get in fast, and Gil drives fast. That's what Gil does. She said it without looking at me, and I felt something complicated that I couldn't identify at the time, and which I've since decided was the feeling of being known entirely, including the parts that are limitations. We went out the back door in a line. Nestor first because he knew the layout, then me because I was driving, then Ren, then the others. The heat hit us, and the alley was silent, except for the hum of an HVAC unit on the roof, and the distant sound of a siren, maybe 2 miles away, which in Tucson could mean anything on any day. The truck was where I'd left it, 15 feet from the loading dock, and it looked absurd sitting there in the sun like it was waiting for someone to load lumber into the bed. I unlocked it with the remote, and the beep echoed off the cinder block wall of the strip mall. And Nestor flinched, and Ren said, "I shall go," in a voice barely above a whisper, and we moved fast. 4 people in the back seat, Ren in the front passenger, Nestor and the fire extinguisher man in the bed, lying flat, which Nestor had suggested because it kept their profile low. I got behind the wheel, and the steering wheel burned my palms again, and I didn't care. I put it in drive and rolled down the alley toward Ina Road, and I checked the rear-view mirror every 2 seconds and saw nothing behind us except heat shimmer rising off the asphalt. We turned onto Ina and headed east toward Oracle, and the road was empty in a way that Ina Road is never empty at 3:50 in the afternoon. Every light was green, which should have felt lucky and instead felt like the system had given up caring who went where. And I drove at exactly the speed limit because some instinct told me that speed attracted attention, and attention was the wrong thing to attract. "Turn south on Oracle," Ren said. "I know. You missed the turn onto River last time we came this way. That was 2 years ago, and I was looking at my phone. You were looking at your phone. This is what we do. This is what we've done for 11 years of marriage. Ren reminds me of the time I did the thing wrong, and I absorb it, and we both feel better because the world is briefly normal again. And I could feel the people in the back seat watching us like we were a nature documentary about a species they couldn't quite identify. I turned south on Oracle. The road opened up for maybe a quarter mile, and then I saw what was ahead, and my foot came off the gas involuntarily. A cluster of cars had stopped in both lanes about 200 yards south, near the River Road intersection. Some of them had their doors open. One was up on the median with its front wheels in the landscaping gravel. I could see people, some standing by their cars, some walking in the road, and at least 2 who were on the ground, though I couldn't tell if they'd fallen or been put there. "Go around," Ren said. "There's no room." "The right shoulder. Take the right shoulder." I pulled onto the shoulder and drove slowly past the cluster of stopped cars and I kept my eyes forward and my window up and the air conditioning on, because I did not want to hear what was happening outside. The man in the back seat with the gash on his head said, "Jesus," very quietly. And I saw in my peripheral vision something moving between two of the stopped cars, low and fast, and I pressed the gas and we cleared the intersection, and the road opened up again. Oracle to Grant, Grant to the freeway, freeway south to Valencia, Valencia to the house, Wren said, narrating the route like a flight plan. 20 minutes. 15 if traffic's clear. It won't be clear, Gil. She was right. She's usually right about the things I'm wrong about, which is a pattern that has sustained our marriage, and which I have never once acknowledged out loud, because acknowledging it would require me to admit that my speed is a symptom and not a skill. We passed Orange Grove going south, and the road was manageable, scattered cars but nothing blocked. And then my phone buzzed on the seat between us, and I grabbed it, and the screen showed a text from a number I didn't recognize. I handed it to Wren. "It's from Letitia," she said. Letitia Duarte was our next-door neighbor, a retired paralegal who watered her gravel yard every morning at 6, and who had once called animal control on a roadrunner because she thought it was looking at her aggressively, and who I liked despite her many opinions. She says there's something happening on the south side. She says she can hear gunshots from the direction of the Walmart on Valencia. That's near our house. That's a mile from our house. I looked at the dashboard clock. 3:53. We had been driving for 16 minutes. The gas gauge showed 3/4 of a tank, which was fine, except that a 3/4 tank meant I hadn't filled up yesterday like Wren had asked me to, because I never fill up until the light comes on, because I'm a man who believes he will always have time for one more stop. "We might need to not go home," I said. "Where else would we go?" "South, out of the city. Green Valley, Tubac, Nogales even. Our house has walls and food and doors that lock. And a Walmart a mile away with gunshots." Wren went quiet, and I could feel her running the calculation, because she is a calculator and I'm a sprinter. And our marriage is the argument between those two approaches played out over 11 years of mortgage payments and dentist appointments, and who forgot to defrost the chicken. The man with the gash on his forehead leaned forward between the front seats. "I need to get to my wife. She's at Desert View Apartments on Speedway." "That's east," I said. "I know that's east. We're going south." "I understand you're going south. I'm asking you to detour east on Speedway and drop me off. It's 3 miles. 3 miles in the wrong direction. My wife is there." I felt the weight of that sentence, and I kept driving south on Oracle, and I said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't make me either a liar or a monster. 3 miles east was 6 minutes. 6 minutes there and 6 back was 12 minutes of driving through a city that was getting worse by the block, with 7 people in a truck and 2 of them lying in the bed, exposed to whatever was outside. And I knew what the right thing to do was. And I knew what the fast thing to do was, and they were not the same thing. "Gil," Wren said. "I heard him. I know you heard him. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to keep going south." The man sat back. He didn't argue. He pressed the paper towel harder against his eyebrow and looked out the window, and I could see his jaw working. And I knew he was memorizing this moment as the moment a stranger chose not to help him, which is exactly what it was. And I also knew that if Wren had been the one at Desert View Apartments on Speedway, I would have driven there without being asked, and I would have driven through a wall to get to her. So my decision was not moral. It was just personal. I was protecting the person I'd already reached, and I was letting someone else's person stay unreached. And the logic was simple and brutal, and the kind of math I'd been doing in real estate for 20 years. Protect your asset, cut your losses, keep moving. We hit the Grant Road intersection, and it was the worst so far. Cars gridlocked in all 4 directions, horns going. A Tucson PD cruiser pulled sideways across the westbound lanes with its lights on but nobody in it. And I could see a thin column of smoke rising from somewhere south of Grant, near the freeway on-ramp. Which meant the freeway might not be an option. Surface streets, Wren said before I could speak. Take Euclid south to Broadway, Broadway west to the freeway, or just stay on surface streets all the way home. I turned right on Grant, drove 2 blocks west, turned left on Euclid, and headed south into the University District. The University of Arizona campus was on our left, and the streets here were residential and quieter. Students' cars parked along the curbs, a few people on sidewalks who looked confused but not panicked. And for about 4 blocks, it felt almost normal, until we reached the Speedway intersection, and the man in the back seat said, "Here, let me out here." I stopped the truck. The man with the gash opened the door and got out and stood on the sidewalk and looked east down Speedway, which stretched away flat and sun-bleached into the distance. And he looked back at me through the open door, and I expected anger, but what I got was something worse, which was understanding. He knew why I'd made the choice I'd made. He knew because he was a man with a wife too, and he knew the hierarchy. He closed the door and turned east and started walking, and I watched him in the rearview mirror getting smaller until Wren said go, and I went. Nestor banged on the rear window of the cab, and I rolled it down. "There's someone following us." I checked the side mirror. A woman in a blue medical scrub top was walking behind the truck about 30 yards back. Walking is the wrong word. She was moving at a pace between walking and jogging, steady and mechanical. And her head was tilted at an angle that made me think of a bird listening for a worm underground. And her arms were at her sides, but not swinging the way arms swing when a person walks. "She's been behind us since Grant," Nestor said. "She's 30 yards back. She can't catch us. She's been keeping pace. We slow down, she slows down. We stopped just now, and she stopped." I looked in the rear-view mirror again, and the woman in scrubs had stopped walking and was standing in the middle of the road, looking at the back of the truck. And I pressed the gas, and we moved south on Euclid. And I watched her start walking again. Same pace, same tilt, same mechanical purpose. And I thought, she's not chasing us. She's following the sound. I rolled the window back up. The teenage girl in the back seat took her earbuds out for the first time and said, "Where are we going exactly?" "South," Wren said. "Like Mexico South?" "Home south, for now." "I live in Marana," the girl said. Marana was north, the opposite direction. "My mom is in Marana." "We can't go north," I said. "I know. I'm just telling you where she is." She said it flat, the way a teenager says a fact they've already processed and filed under things adults can't fix. And she put her earbuds back in, and the older woman in the sun hat put her arm around the girl's shoulders, and the girl let her. Which is how I knew she was scared. Because no teenager lets a stranger put an arm around them unless the world has shifted enough to make strangers into something else. We turned west on Broadway. The road was wider here, 4 lanes plus a center turn lane. And traffic was light, but not empty. I could see other drivers moving with purpose, some of them going fast. Some of them pulled over with their flashers on and their heads down looking at their phones. And I wondered how many of them had gotten a phone call like mine, and how many of them were driving towards someone, and how many of them were already too late. The smoke column I'd seen from Grant was visible again to the south, thicker now and darker. And I could smell it through the air conditioning, that acrid chemical smell that means a building is burning and not a brush fire. And I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel, and my palms were sweating, and the leather was slick. "Gil, are you okay to drive?" Ren asked. "I'm fine." "Your hands are shaking." "My hands are wet. The wheel is hot." "Your hands are shaking." She was right. I was shaking, and I hadn't noticed because noticing things about myself is not something I do. Which is the whole problem. Which is what Ren has been trying to tell me for 11 years in various registers from gentle to exhausted. I turned south on 6th Avenue, which runs parallel to the freeway and which I know well because 3 of my commercial listings are on this stretch: a strip mall, a tire shop, and a vacant lot I've been trying to unload for 2 years. And the familiarity of the road calmed me the way familiar roads do, the way knowing exactly where the potholes are and which signals are long can trick your brain into thinking the world is still the world you memorized. Then I saw the roadblock. 2 Tucson PD cruisers and a fire truck parked across 6th Avenue at the Irvington intersection, about a mile south of Broadway. Officers standing behind the vehicles. A line of cars stopped in both lanes. I slowed down and joined the line, and Ren leaned forward and squinted through the windshield. "They're checking cars." "For what?" "I don't know. They're looking inside each one and then waving them through or turning them around." I inched forward in line. 6 cars ahead of us, then 5. I watched the officers approach each car, lean down to the driver's window, look in the back, and either point south or point north. More cars were being pointed north than south. One officer had his hand on his holster the entire time, not gripping it, just resting his palm on the top of it in a way that suggested he'd been told to do that, and was trying to look calm about it. We reached the front of the line. An officer came to my window, and I rolled it down, and the heat and the smoke smell poured in. "How many in the vehicle?" "5 in the cab, 2 in the bed." He looked in the back seat. He looked at the older woman, the teenage girl, Ren's purse in her lap, the absence of blood or visible wounds on anyone inside. Then he looked at me. "Where are you headed?" "Home, Valencia and Cardinal, the Rancho Mesquite neighborhood." "Anyone in this vehicle been bitten, scratched, or had fluid contact with an affected individual?" "No." "Anyone showing symptoms? Confusion, aggression, involuntary movement, loss of speech?" "No. We came from the Fry's on Ina. We were in the stockroom the whole time." He looked at me for a long moment, and then stepped back and pointed south. "Stay on surface streets. The freeway is closed between Congress and Valencia. Multi-vehicle incident. If you encounter a roadblock, do not attempt to go around it. Turn back and find an alternate route." "What's happening?" I asked. "Sir, I need you to keep moving." I drove through the intersection, and the road opened up, and the afternoon sun was in my eyes now, dropping toward the Tucson mountains to the west, and I pulled down the visor and kept going south on 6th Avenue, and the city changed around us from commercial to industrial to residential, the houses getting smaller and older, and the yards turning from decorative gravel to chain link and packed dirt. And the streets were empty in a way that residential streets in South Tucson are not empty at 4 in the afternoon in June, when kids should be running through sprinklers and old men should be sitting in lawn chairs under ramadas, and someone should be grilling something somewhere, and instead there was silence and closed curtains, and a dog standing in a front yard looking at our truck as we passed, just standing there, with its ears up and its tail still. "How far?" Nestor asked through the rear window. "Maybe 4 miles?" The 2 of us back here were cooking, literally. The bed liner is maybe 140 degrees. I hadn't thought about that. 2 men lying flat in a truck bed in direct Arizona sun. I pulled into the parking lot of a closed tire shop, and they climbed out of the bed, red-faced and sweating, and got into the back seat, which meant 7 people in a 5-person cab, which meant the teenage girl ended up half on the older woman's lap, and the fire extinguisher man had his knees against the back of my seat. And nobody complained, because complaining was for the version of the world where discomfort mattered. I pulled back onto 6th Avenue and drove 4 more blocks, and then the truck started pulling to the right, and I heard the sound every driver knows, the rhythmic flapping of a flat tire, and I pulled over and got out, and the rear right tire was completely flat, not just low, flat, with a 3-inch piece of metal, a bracket, or a piece of fencing sticking out of the sidewall. I stood there in the 107-degree heat, looking at a flat tire on a street I didn't recognize in a neighborhood where every house had its curtains drawn, and every front door was closed, and the only sound was the tick of my engine cooling, and the distant wail of a siren that could have been 3 miles away or 30. "Do you have a spare?" Ren asked from the passenger window. "Under the bed." "Do you know how to change it?" This is the question that revealed everything about our marriage, and about me, and about the specific failure mode of a man who has always paid someone else to handle the physical world. I sell buildings. I do not build them. I negotiate leases. I do not fix things. I have called a service for every flat tire I've ever had, every clogged drain, every appliance that made a sound it shouldn't. And I have done this not because I'm incapable, but because I have always believed my time was more valuable spent doing what I'm good at, which is talking and driving and closing, and standing in the sun on a crumbling street with a flat tire and no cell service and 7 people depending on me to do something I'd always outsourced, was the moment the bill came due on 20 years of believing that competence was something you could delegate. "I can figure it out," I said. "Gil, I can figure it out." I pulled the spare out from under the bed, and it was one of those compact temporary spares that look like a bicycle tire compared to the real thing. And I found the jack and the lug wrench in the tool kit that came with the truck and that I had literally never opened. And I got down on my knees on the asphalt, which burned through my pants. And I started trying to loosen the lug nuts. They wouldn't turn. I put all my weight on the wrench, and they wouldn't turn. I'd seen people stand on the wrench to break the lugs loose, and I tried that, and the wrench slipped off, and I scraped my knuckles on the fender, and blood welled up across 3 fingers, and I swore and tried again. Nestor appeared beside me. "Let me." He took the wrench and positioned it on the first lug nut, and stood on it, and bounced once, and the nut broke free with a crack. And he moved to the next one and did the same thing, calm and efficient. And I stood there holding my bleeding hand and watching a 22-year-old grocery store employee do in 3 minutes what I could not do at all. And I had the thought that every man has at some point, but which I had apparently been saving for the collapse of civilization, which is, I am not the man I think I am. Nestor had the spare on in 12 minutes. 12 minutes of standing in the sun on a dead street in South Tucson, listening for sounds that didn't belong, and watching the shadows getting longer and knowing that every minute was a minute the city was getting worse, and we were standing still. The fire extinguisher man, his name was Dolph, which I learned because the older woman in the sun hat called him that. Dolph, like the name of someone who does exactly what Dolph was doing, which was standing guard with a fire extinguisher in one hand and watching both ends of the street. Dolph said he hadn't seen anyone move on the street the entire time, but that he thought he'd heard something from the alley behind the houses. A scraping sound, he said. Metal on concrete. We got back in the truck and I drove south. The compact spare made a high whining sound at anything over 40, and the truck pulled slightly left, and every bump felt wrong. But we were moving. Valencia Road appeared ahead of us like a finish line, and I turned west and drove toward our subdivision, and the streets were recognizable now. The Circle K where I get coffee, the car wash with the inflatable tube man that's been deflated for 6 months, the elementary school with its empty playground and its chain-link gate standing open. And I turned into Rancho Mesquite, and the gate arm was up, because the HOA's electronic system had apparently decided this was a good day to malfunction. And I drove to our house and pulled into the driveway, and Ren was already out of the truck before I'd put it in park. The front door was still open. I had left it open when I ran out, and I could see into the foyer from the driveway, the tile floor and the console table and the bowl where we put our keys. And Ren walked up the path and then stopped. Gil, the door was open the whole time. I know. Anything could have come in. I hadn't considered that. I had left the front door of our house open in a city where things were biting people, and I had not thought about it once during the entire drive, because I'd been thinking about getting to Ren. And now I was standing in my driveway, with 6 other people looking at an open door that could have an empty house behind it, or could have something else. I went in first. I checked every room. The house was empty and intact, and exactly as I'd left it, except that a sleeve of golf balls was still on the kitchen counter. And the scissors were still open next to them. And the microwave clock said 4:22. And the silence inside the house was the particular silence of a building that has been alone, which is different from the silence of a building where someone is hiding. "It's clear," I said. And everyone came inside, and I closed the front door and locked it and pulled the deadbolt, and Ren closed the blinds in every room without being asked. And the fire extinguisher man, Dolph, put his extinguisher on the kitchen counter next to the golf balls, and sat down on the floor with his back against the refrigerator and closed his eyes, and the teenage girl said, "Can I use your bathroom?" And the older woman in the sun hat said, "Is there water? I need water." And suddenly the house was full of people doing the small mechanical things that humans do when they've been terrified and have reached a place that feels safe, even if safe is a word that no longer means what it used to. Ren pulled me into the bedroom and closed the door. "We need to leave Tucson. We just got here. Gil, listen to me. This isn't a thing that passes. I was in that store. I saw what happened to the cashier. I saw her get up after she was bitten, and she was not the same person. Her face was the same face, but nothing behind it was the same. That's not a mental health crisis. That's not drugs. That's something that spreads, and it was spreading in that store in real time, person by person. And whatever it is, it's in this city now, and it's going to be in this neighborhood soon." "Where do we go?" "South. My cousin Lorraine in Sierra Vista. That's an hour and a half on the freeway, maybe longer on surface streets. She has a house on 5 acres near the base. She has walls and distance, and Fort Huachuca is right there. And the military." "Ren." "What?" "The truck has a compact spare. I can't do highway speed on a compact spare. Then we take someone else's car." I looked at her. She looked at me. I saw in her face the same calculation I was making, which was that taking someone else's car meant either stealing one from the street or asking one of the people in our living room for theirs. And both options required being a different kind of person than we had been 90 minutes ago. "Who drove here?" I asked. "Nobody. You drove. We all came in your truck." "So there's no other car?" "Letitia's car is next door. The Buick." "We're not stealing Letitia's car." "We're not stealing it. We're going to ask her, and she's going to say yes because she can come with us." We walked next door. The house was a single-story stucco twin of ours, Same floor plan, same gravel yard, same decorative cactus by the front door. I knocked. I knocked again. I tried the door, and it was locked. "Letitia," Wren called. Nothing. I went around to the side gate, and it was unlatched, and I walked through Letitia's side yard past her meticulously organized garbage cans and her hose coiled perfectly on its rack, and I looked through the sliding glass door into her living room, and the TV was on, a news broadcast, and Letitia's reading glasses were on the end table next to a glass of iced tea with the ice still unmelted, which meant she'd poured it recently on one and left. "She's gone," I said. "The car's still here." The Buick was in the carport. A 2019 Enclave, silver, immaculate. Letitia's spare key was, and I knew this, because she'd told me once during a conversation I'd barely listened to under a fake rock near her back door. One of those hollow resin rocks that looks nothing like an actual rock, but which Letitia believed was very convincing. I found the rock. I found the key. I stood in Letitia Duarte's carport holding the key to her car, and I thought about the man with a gash on his forehead walking east on Speedway toward his wife. And I thought about how I had left him there, because my calculation was personal and not moral. And now I was about to take an absent woman's car, because my calculation was still personal. It was always personal. It had been personal from the moment Wren called me, and the only question was whether personal was a good enough reason to do all the things I was about to do. "Gil," Wren said from behind me. She had followed me around the side. She would say yes. "You don't know that." "I know Letitia." She would say yes, and she would say, "Take the big cooler from the garage, too, and fill it with ice. And here are the extra keys to the storage unit, and call my nephew in Phoenix and tell him I'm fine." That is the kind of person she is. I unlocked the Buick, quarter tank of gas. I drove it over to our driveway and parked it next to the truck, and went inside and told everyone the plan. The plan was 2 vehicles, south on surface streets, Sierra Vista, 90 miles, Wren's cousin Lorraine. The Buick takes 4, the truck takes 3. I drive the truck because it's mine, and I know how it handles on the spare. Wren drives the Buick because she drives like someone who took a defensive driving course, which she did in 2019, because she is Wren. Nobody argued. This is the thing that surprised me. 6 strangers and my wife and me in a house with a locked front door and closed blinds, and every one of them just nodded and started moving, gathering water bottles and food from the pantry and Wren's first aid kit from the hall closet. And the only question anyone asked was the teenage girl, who said, "Can I charge my phone for 5 minutes?" And I said yes, and she plugged it into the kitchen outlet and stood there watching it. And I knew she was going to try to call her mother in Marana, and I knew the call wouldn't go through, and I watched her face when it didn't, and her face did not change, which was worse than if it had. We loaded the vehicles. I took Nestor and Dolph in the truck. Wren took the older woman, her name was Gail, I'd finally learned, and the teenage girl, whose name I never learned and who I think about more often than any of the others. We pulled out of Rancho Mesquite at 4:39. The sun was lower now, the shadows long, the light that particular golden color that makes Tucson look like a postcard when it's not falling apart. I led in the truck with Wren following in the Buick, and we went south on Cardinal to Valencia and turned east. Valencia was bad, not impassable. Bad in the way a road gets bad when everyone on it has the same idea at the same time, which is leave. Both eastbound lanes were full of cars, bumper to bumper, moving at maybe 10 miles an hour, and the westbound lanes were mostly empty, except for emergency vehicles going the other direction, toward the city, which told me something about where the situation was worse and where it was better, and that we were at least heading in the better direction. I called Ren on the phone. By some miracle, the call connected. Stay close. If I change lanes, you change lanes. I can see you. Gil, the traffic. I know. How far to the I-10 junction? Maybe 5 miles. And then? 90 east to Sierra Vista, if it's open. The traffic crept. I watched the dashboard clock with the kind of attention I'd never given any clock in my life. And I understood for the first time the particular cruelty of time during an emergency, which is that every minute feels like it contains an hour of consequence and an hour of waste simultaneously. And you can't speed it up or slow it down. You can only sit in it and watch the numbers change while the world outside your window changes faster. We passed a gas station on Valencia with a line of cars wrapping around the block. People were out of their vehicles, standing in line, some of them arguing. A man in a cowboy hat was gesturing at a woman in a minivan who was trying to cut the line. A teenager was filling gas cans, 3 of them, lined up on the pavement. Normal desperation. The kind of thing that happens during a hurricane warning or a wildfire evacuation. Which is what I told myself this was, because the alternative was still too large to fit inside my head. Then the traffic stopped, completely stopped, both lanes, nothing moving. I could see maybe a quarter mile ahead, and the road was a solid wall of cars and trucks and one RV that had no business being on Valencia Road. And I sat there with the engine running and the AC blowing, and Nestor next to me in the passenger seat and Dolph behind me. And we sat there for 4 minutes, and nothing moved. Take the shoulder, Nestor said. There's no shoulder. It's curb and dirt. Then take the dirt. I looked at him. He was 22, and he'd spent the last 2 hours being more competent than me in every measurable way. And he was looking at me with an expression that said, "You are the one who moves. So move." I pulled onto the dirt median between the eastbound and westbound lanes and drove east at about 15 miles an hour with the compact spare whining and rocks pinging off the undercarriage, and I watched in the rear view to make sure Ren followed, and she did. The silver Buick pulling onto the dirt behind me. And we drove like that for maybe half a mile until I could see what had stopped the traffic. An accident. A semi had jackknifed across both eastbound lanes about 100 yards east of the Kolb Road intersection. And behind it, visible past the trailer, were flashing lights and what looked like a military vehicle, a Humvee, and soldiers or guardsmen, I couldn't tell, standing in the road with rifles and orange cones. "Checkpoint," Nestor said. "Or a roadblock. Same thing right now." I couldn't get around the semi. The median I was driving on ended at the intersection, and the cross traffic from Kolb Road, what little there was being directed by a guardsman in a vest. And I realized we were going to have to wait in line like everyone else and crawl through whatever process they'd set up to sort the cars going east from the cars they were turning back. It took 35 minutes to reach the front of the line. 35 minutes of sitting in a truck in the desert sun with the engine running and the gas gauge dropping and Nestor checking the mirrors every 10 seconds. And Dolph gripping his fire extinguisher in the back seat like it was a teddy bear. And I watched the clock go from 4:51 to 5:26. And every minute felt like being charged interest on a debt I couldn't calculate. At the front of the line, a National Guard sergeant in a sweated-through uniform leaned down to my window. "Where are you headed?" "Sierra Vista. Family there." "How many in the vehicle?" "3, and a vehicle behind me with 4 more." "Anyone in either vehicle showing symptoms? Bites, scratches, unusual behavior?" "No." He looked at Nestor, then at Dolph and the fire extinguisher, and he almost smiled. "We're routing all civilian traffic south on Kolb to I-10 east. Valencia is closed ahead due to a containment operation. You'll merge onto I-10 at the Kolb Road on-ramp. Speed limit is being enforced at 50. Do not stop for any reason between here and Benson. If you see an individual on the highway, do not stop. If your vehicle breaks down, stay inside and wait for a patrol. Is the highway open all the way to Sierra Vista? As of 20 minutes ago, I-10 East is open to Benson. After Benson, you're on 90 South. I can't tell you what's past Benson. Thank you. Sir. He straightened up and then leaned back down. Fill up if you can. The Chevron on Kolb just north of the on-ramp was open 15 minutes ago. There's a line, but it's moving. I drove south on Kolb to the Chevron, and there was a line, 8 cars, but it was moving. And I pulled in and waited, and Ren pulled in behind me, and we sat there while the sun dropped another degree toward the mountains, and the sky turned from white to gold, to that deep amber that makes the saguaros look like they're on fire. Which is a beautiful thing to see on a normal day, and which on this day looked like the world was showing me its best face before taking it away. When I reached the pump, I got out and swiped my card, and it declined. I tried again. Declined. I looked at the card reader, and it said network error, and I realized that whatever systems ran the world's credit card transactions were either overloaded or down, and I had no cash because I never carry cash because I use my phone for everything, because I'm a man of frictionless modern systems. And I stood at the pump with my card in my hand and the gas cap open and the fuel gauge showing below a quarter tank, and I understood with sudden physical clarity that convenience is a form of vulnerability. Ren appeared beside me. She had cash. A folded envelope in her purse with $300 in 20s because she keeps cash for emergencies. She has always kept cash for emergencies. She keeps it in an envelope labeled emergencies in her handwriting. And she has told me to do the same thing approximately 40 times. And I've never done it because I'm Gil Harmon and I don't prepare. I perform. She handed me a 20. I went inside the gas station, and the clerk was behind the counter with his phone in his hand, looking at something, and his face was the color of old paper. And he took my 20 and gave me change. And I went back out and pumped $14 of gas, which was not a full tank, but was enough to get us to Sierra Vista. And I filled the Buick too with the rest of the 20. We merged onto I-10 East at 5:43 p.m., and the highway was open and moving, and there were more cars than a normal Tuesday evening, but not gridlocked. And the Rincon Mountains were ahead of us, and the Catalinas were behind us, and Tucson was behind us. And I drove east at 50 miles an hour on a compact spare with my wife in the car behind me, and 5 strangers distributed between 2 vehicles, and the sun was going down. And I thought, this is the fastest I've ever gone, and the slowest it has ever felt. The drive from Tucson to Benson on I-10 is normally about 45 minutes. We did it in 1 hour and 10 because of the speed limit, and because twice we had to slow for military convoys going the other direction, westbound toward Tucson, long lines of green vehicles and canvas-covered trucks that rumbled past us like a parade for something no one was celebrating. Nestor watched them go by without expression. Dolph said, "That's a lot of trucks." And I said nothing because I was counting them, and the number was too high to mean anything good. At Benson, we exited onto Highway 90 South toward Sierra Vista, and the road was 2 lanes, and the traffic thinned to almost nothing. And the landscape opened up into that wide desert basin between the Dragoon Mountains and the Huachuca Mountains, open and rolling and dotted with mesquite and ocotillo. And the sky was turning purple in the east and orange in the west, and I'd been driving for over 2 hours. And my hands had stopped shaking, and my back ached and my knuckles were still bleeding slightly from the lug wrench, and I felt a calm that I recognized as exhaustion pretending to be peace. My phone rang. Ren. "Gil, The girl is crying. Which the teenager? She can't reach her mother. She's been trying since we left the house, and nothing goes through. She's sitting in the back seat crying, and Gail is holding her. And I don't know what to say to her. Tell her we'll figure it out when we get to Lorraine's. That's not good enough, and you know it. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. I want you to know that there's a kid in this car whose mother is in Marana, and we are driving in the opposite direction, and she came with us because she had no other option, and we are responsible for her now. Okay? Gil, say you understand. I understand. I hung up and I drove, and the road curved south through the grasslands, and the last light drained out of the sky, and I turned on my headlights. And the road ahead was empty and straight, and the desert was dark on both sides, and the stars were coming out, which happens faster in the desert than anywhere I've ever been. Like the sky has been waiting all day to show you what it actually looks like. Sierra Vista appeared as a glow on the horizon about 20 minutes later. A small city's worth of light spread across the base of the Huachuca Mountains. And as we got closer, I could see that the lights were brighter than they should have been. More of them. And I realized it was the military base. Lit up, every light on. And as we reached the edge of town, I saw a checkpoint manned by actual soldiers, not guardsmen. Soldiers in full gear with a barrier and a searchlight. And I slowed down and stopped and rolled down my window. And the soldier who approached was young and polite and tired. And he asked me the same questions I'd already answered twice, and I gave the same answers, and he waved us through. Lorraine's house was on a dirt road east of the main part of town, backed up against the foothills, a single-story adobe on 5 acres with a cistern and a well and a vegetable garden and a workshop where her late husband used to restore motorcycles. Lorraine was standing on the porch when we pulled up, arms crossed, a cigarette between her fingers, and she watched 7 strangers and her cousin get out of 2 vehicles and walk toward her house, and she said, "Ren called me 4 hours ago. I've been waiting. There's food inside and the spare rooms are made up. And someone needs to tell me what's happening, because the TV went to static an hour ago." We went inside. The house smelled like green chili and cigarette smoke and old wood. And there was a pot of pozole on the stove and a stack of bowls on the counter. And Lorraine started ladling soup without asking if anyone was hungry, because she was the kind of person who fed people as a first response to everything. Grief, fear, boredom, arrival. And within 10 minutes, everyone was sitting somewhere in that small house eating pozole and not talking, just eating. The sound of spoons and bowls and swallowing, and the teenager wiping her nose on her sleeve, and Gail taking off her sun hat for the first time, and her hair underneath matted and gray and beautiful. I sat on Lorraine's porch with a bowl in my hands, and Ren came out and sat next to me, and we didn't talk for a while. The sky was full of stars, and the base was lit up to the south, and somewhere to the northwest, in the direction of Tucson, the horizon had a faint orange glow that could have been the city's lights, or could have been something else. "The man with the cut on his head," Ren said. "Yeah. You left him on Speedway." "Yeah." "Why?" "Because going east was 12 extra minutes, and I didn't want to risk it." "Risk what?" "Losing time, losing you. You already had me. I was in the truck." I didn't answer because she was right. She'd been in the truck. She'd been safe in the truck, sitting next to me. And the man with the gash had asked for 3 miles, and I'd said no because I was already moving. And stopping felt like dying, and changing direction felt like losing. And the truth was that I had made the calculation in the time it took him to lean forward between the seats. And the calculation was no, instant. No deliberation, no moral weight. Just, no, I'm going south. Because south was the plan, and the plan was the only thing between me and the kind of paralysis that happens when a man who runs for a living has to stop and think. "Do you think he made it?" Ren asked. "I don't know. Desert View Apartments. That's near the base of a mountain. I know where it is. That's a rough neighborhood, even on a good day." "I know, Ren." She put her hand on my knee, not a comfort gesture, a grounding gesture, the kind of touch that means, "I'm not going to let you dodge this." "His name was Gil too," she said. "What?" "His name. I heard Gail call him Gil when she was helping him with the paper towel. Did you know that?" "No. His wife is at Desert View Apartments, and his name is Gil, and you left him on Speedway. And I need you to sit with that." I sat with it. I sat on Lorraine's porch in the dark, holding a bowl of pozole I hadn't eaten. And I sat with the fact that a man with my name, and a wife he was desperate to reach, had asked me for 12 minutes. And I had given him nothing. And I had done it without hesitation, because hesitation is the thing I've spent my whole life eliminating. And for the first time in my life, I understood that the thing I was proudest of, my speed, my decisiveness, my refusal to stop, was also the thing that had let me drive past another man's desperation without feeling the weight of it until hours later on a porch in the dark. Inside the house, the teenager was on the landline. Lorraine had a landline, an actual corded phone on the kitchen wall, and somehow it still worked. And the girl was standing there with the receiver pressed to her ear, and she was waiting for someone to pick up. And I could see through the screen door that her mouth was moving, saying, "Come on, come on, come on," without sound. And then she said, "Mom." And her whole body changed. Her shoulders dropped and her chin came up, and she said, "Mom, I'm okay. I'm in Sierra Vista with some people." And I looked away because it felt like something I shouldn't watch. Ren leaned her head against my shoulder. "I thought you weren't going to make it to the store," she said. "I made it." "You left the front door open." "I know." "You left the front door open and you came to get me, and you didn't grab water or food or the emergency kit under the bed." "There's an emergency kit under the bed." "I put it there 3 years ago. I told you about it." "You probably did." "I did. You said, 'Good thinking, babe,' and went back to your phone." I could hear Nestor inside talking to Lorraine about the stockroom, about the cashier, about the sounds. Dolph was in the bathroom. Gail was asleep on the couch with her sun hat over her face. The world outside was dark and wrong, and the world inside this house was warm and temporary, and I knew it was temporary because I am not a man who believes in safety. I am a man who believes in motion. And sitting still on this porch felt like a debt accumulating. "We stay here tonight," Ren said. "Tomorrow we figure out what's next." "What if tomorrow is worse?" "It will be worse. That's why we rest tonight." I put the bowl down on the porch railing. The pozole had gone cold. A moth was circling the porch light, making its slow, useless orbit. And I watched it, and I thought about the man on Speedway, the other Gil, walking east in the heat with a bleeding forehead and a wife waiting for him in an apartment complex I'd never been to. And I thought about the compact spare on my truck that Nestor had changed, and the cash in Ren's purse that had bought our gas, and the landline in Lorraine's kitchen that had connected a girl to her mother. And I thought about how every single thing that had gotten us here was something I hadn't done. Someone else's competence, someone else's preparation, someone else's hands. And I thought about how I had driven 11 miles in 12 minutes and pulled a woman out of a stockroom and driven 90 miles south to safety. And I had done it all on speed and nerve, and the absolute belief that going fast was enough. And it had been enough today, barely, by the width of a spare tire and the grace of other people's readiness. And I did not know if it would be enough tomorrow. A sound came from inside the house. Lorraine's voice, sharp. "Turn that up." Nestor was at the radio. Not a shortwave, not a ham, just an FM clock radio on the kitchen counter. The kind you buy at a drugstore, and a voice was reading a list of cities where containment had been declared, and the list was long, and getting longer, and Tucson was on it, and Phoenix was on it. And the voice was steady in the way that voices are steady when the person speaking has been told to stay calm. And I listened through the screen door, and I looked at Wren, and her face in the porch light was sharp and focused and already calculating the next move. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she said, "Tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah." And neither of us went inside yet. The other Gil was still out there. That was the thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Somewhere between Speedway and Desert View Apartments, in the dark in a city I'd fled, a man with my name was either with his wife or he wasn't. And I would never know which. And never knowing is a kind of weight I'd never carried before, because I'd always been moving too fast to pick anything up. Inside, the girl hung up the phone and walked to the couch, and sat down next to Gail, and put her head on the older woman's shoulder and closed her eyes. And her sneakers were still on, white Nikes with a grass stain on the left toe, and she'd been wearing them for 6 hours, and she hadn't taken them off once, and I knew why. Because taking your shoes off means you've arrived somewhere you trust, and she hadn't arrived yet. None of us had. Wren stood up and went inside, and I heard her talking to Lorraine about water, about how much was in the cistern, about the well pump, about the garden, about how many people could stay and for how long. And her voice was the voice I married, organized and precise and already 3 steps ahead. And I stayed on the porch and looked at the sky, and the orange glow to the northwest had gotten brighter while we'd been sitting there, brighter than a city should be. And the stars around it had dimmed the way stars dim when there's light pollution. Except this wasn't pollution. Tucson was burning. I could see it from 90 miles away. The place where our house was, the place where Letitia's Buick had been parked, the place where the Fry's on Ina Road sat with its stockroom door and its dairy coolers and whatever was left inside. All of it was under that glow. And I stood up and gripped the porch railing, and the wood was cool under my hands. Finally, something cool after hours of heat. And I looked at that glow, and I tried to feel something that matched the size of what I was seeing, and what came was not grief or fear or the vigilance I'd expected, but something smaller and more specific. The memory of Wren's voice on the phone, the first call, the one that started everything, and the sound of a shopping cart hitting metal in the background, and the way she'd said, "Gil, listen to me," with the emphasis on listen. Because she knew that listening was the thing I'd never been good at. And she'd needed me to be good at it right then, for maybe the first time ever. And I had listened, and I had come, and it had been almost enough. The screen door opened behind me. Nestor came out and stood next to me and looked at the glow on the horizon. "That's Tucson?" "Yeah." "My mom lives in Drexel Heights." I looked at him. He was 22 years old, and he had changed my tire and organized the stockroom, and walked out of a building where people were being attacked, and he had not once mentioned that he had a parent in the city until right now, standing on a stranger's porch in the dark, looking at an orange horizon. "I'm going to find a car tomorrow," he said. "I'm going back. Nestor, I'm going back. You don't have to come." I didn't say anything because there was nothing I could say. He was going to drive back into a city that was burning to find his mother, because that's what you do when your person is somewhere you're not. You go. And I knew this, because I had done it 9 hours ago, except that I had done it when the distance was 11 miles and the roads were open. And now the distance was 90 miles, and the roads might not exist anymore, and the city might not be this city anymore. And telling him not to go would be the same as telling me not to have driven to the Fries on Ina Road, which is to say, impossible. He went back inside. I heard him asking Lorraine about her late husband's motorcycles. I heard her say one of them ran. I stayed on the porch. The glow on the horizon pulsed and shifted the way fires do. Brighter, darker, brighter. And the night was cooling down the way desert nights do. Fast and total. And I was shivering in my t-shirt, and my hands still smelled like rubber from the spare tire, and my knuckles were scabbing over where I'd scraped them. And the bowl of pozole on the railing had gone completely cold, and a second moth had joined the first one at the porch light. Ren came back out with a blanket and draped it over my shoulders and sat down next to me and said, "Lorraine says the well has good water, and the garden has squash and beans, and there's a propane tank that's 3/4 full." "Good. She says there's a neighborhood watch group that's already been going door to door checking on people." "Good. She says the base sent a truck through 2 hours ago telling everyone to stay indoors and conserve water, and they'll send updates by radio." "Good. Gil, stop saying good and look at me." I looked at her. Her face was tired and specific, and exactly the face I'd been driving toward all afternoon. The face I would have driven through anything to reach, and she was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, which was not the look of someone who was grateful to be rescued, because she had not been rescued. She had survived a stockroom and organized a group and navigated a city from the passenger seat and produced $300 in emergency cash, and known exactly which roads to take and which cousin to call, and where the emergency kit was under the bed. She had survived alongside me, not because of me. The look on her face was the look of a woman who understood that completely and who loved me anyway, and who was making a decision about what to say next that would be more important than anything else she'd said all day. "You were fast enough today," she said. "Tomorrow you need to be something else." I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The orange glow pulsed on the horizon. The moths circled the light. Somewhere inside the house, a girl in white Nikes was sleeping with her shoes on. And somewhere in a dark kitchen, a 22-year-old grocery store employee was planning a ride back into a burning city on a dead man's motorcycle. And somewhere on Speedway, maybe, a man with my name was still walking east. Ren took the cold bowl off the railing and went inside. The screen door closed behind her. I heard it latch, a small metal sound, and I heard her footsteps on the tile floor moving toward the kitchen, and then water running, because she was washing the bowl. Because that is what Ren does. She handles the next thing, and the next thing after that, and the next thing after that. And I sat on the porch, and I understood for the first time in my life that the next thing was not something I could outrun.